Behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered, nor come into mind. But be ye glad and rejoice forever in that which I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem a rejoicing, and her people a joy. And I will rejoice in Jerusalem, and joy in my people. And the voice of weeping shall be no more heard in her, nor the voice of crying.
In the early 20th century, a movement began to develop around a political theory known as technocracy, a system wherein management of governments is handled by technical experts, often involving technology-focused solutions. Early proponents of technocracy claimed that the concept would lead to better management of resources and the protection of the planet. However, this system of governance by technological experts and their technology would also involve a loss of privacy, as well as centralization of power and the management of all human behavior. Although the term appears to have been largely forgotten, the technocratic philosophy and influence can be seen everywhere in our modern digital world.
Already beginning to arrive at the huge civic auditorium, where a large receptive audience turned out to hear Howard Scott as he warned of an impending crisis in America's domestic and foreign affairs.
One of the most influential proponents of technocracy was a man named Howard Scott, a writer who founded the Technical Alliance in New York City in 1919. Scott believed that business owners lacked the necessary skills and data to reform their industry, and thus, control should be handed over to engineers. The technocrats publicized their vision of a centrally planned world via books, speeches, clubs, and political parties. This resulted in a brief period of popularity in the US and Canada in the years following the Great Depression. As politicians and economists searched for a solution to the financial calamity, the technocrats imagined a world where politicians and business owners were replaced with scientists, engineers, and other technical experts who would manage the economy. However, in the 1940s, mainstream interest in the technocracy movement seemed to dissipate. The ideas that underpinned the technocratic vision received a notable endorsement in 1970 when political scientist Zbigniew Brzezinski released his book, Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era. Brzezinski will be familiar to long-term researchers of the ruling elite. Until his death in 2018, Brzezinski was a diplomat who ran in the same circles as David Rockefeller and former Secretary of State and accused war criminal Henry Kissinger. Brzezinski served as advisor to several presidents, from Jimmy Carter to Barack Obama. He was also a member of the Atlantic Council, the National Endowment for Democracy, and the Council on Foreign Relations. Although Brzezinski's book Between Two Ages substituted the term technotronic for technocratic, the depiction of the future is the same, a world in which the scientific and technological elite centrally plan the lives of all humanity. Essentially, Brzezinski's vision is a technologically advanced, authoritarian-style collectivism wherein individual liberties are subordinated to the apparent needs of the collective. When we examine the world of 2025, we clearly see the signs of technocratic influence. For example, we can see this influence in the wealthiest companies and the most influential CEOs. These individuals are running companies that have amassed large amounts of financial wealth as well as unfathomable amounts of digital data on all of their customers. From Jeff Bezos at Amazon, Bill Gates of Microsoft, Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, Elon Musk of Tesla and SpaceX, we can see the technocratic ideology. These men and their colleagues in various technological industries wield immense power through their companies, wealth, and cultural influence. These individuals have enough money, resources, and connections to shape elections, geoengineer the climate, and cause dips in the stock market, to name a few examples. They are the technocratic class of 2025. The book, Technocracy and the American Dream, provides some fantastic insights into the mind of Scott and the technocratic vision he proposed. One thing that is clear is that the technocrats were materialists at heart, finding little use for philosophy or virtue. Scott and his allies saw humans as mechanistic cogs in a larger machine that simply needed to be bent to the will of the machine in the interest of some alleged collective good. Author William Aiken noted that in the technocrats' technological utopia, machines serve man, only when man serves them. Aiken also claimed that the technocrats, quote, would not accept any limitations on the technician's mandate, preferring instead that the, quote, rationality of science and the harmony of the machine, not utopian virtues, would dictate organizational forms. Scott believed that eventually man would come to accept a, quote, reality understood in terms of machine-like function. The reality of the technocratic vision described by Scott is that it would involve a loss of individual choice and liberty. Aiken writes that, quote, under a technocracy, a sizable amount of things deemed good would be given up. For those who desired a new society, the concern for the Commonwealth minimized outdated concepts of individual self-realization, responsibility for oneself, individual conscience, free choice, and self-expression. The whole liberal belief in the dignity and the worth of the individual. There would be no nonsense about individual liberty. He further notes that, quote, certain individual freedoms would be sacrificed to efficiency, and that an individual's job would not be their own choice, but would be, quote, determined by his abilities and the needs of the organization. The technate would decide how goods were produced, where to allocate labor and resources, develop and apply technology, and most of all, assure efficiency. Of course, consumers might have fewer options in the technocrats' marketplace because Scott imagined the technate would restrict many types of goods which involved waste and inefficiency. Aiken writes, quote, for example, since it would increase inefficiency to produce multiple models of automobiles or specially designed housing, these items would have to conform to functional specifications rather than consumer taste.
If you are driving a non-official car, let's give it a new coat of technocracy gray.
Aiken also wrote that the technocrats attempted to combine their faith in positivistic science with a mechanistic view of man and the dominance of technology into a functional ideal that resembled Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Despite the work of Scott and Technocracy Inc., in the 1940s, mainstream interest in the technocracy movement seemed to dissipate. Some researchers attribute this to a lack of a coherent political theory for achieving change, while others say that President Roosevelt in the New Deal provided an alternative solution to financial hardship. Whatever the cause, technocracy ceased to be a topic of mainstream political discourse. However, this was not the end of the technocratic movement.
Elon Musk's grandfather was Joshua Haldeman, who was a bigwig in something called Technocracy Inc., which got shut down. He wanted to create a society in which there were no politicians, there were no elections, there were appointed technocrats and bureaucrats. And he was a big supporter, it seems, of Hitler. The Technocracy Inc. produced a map, what they called a technate, and it went from the north of South America, including Venezuela, Trump is very focused on, Panama, Mexico, United States, Canada, and Greenland, which is kind of extraordinary when you see what's happening with current events. When Technocracy Inc. was shut down in Canada, he went to South Africa, and he's a big supporter of apartheid. Elon Musk, born in South Africa. David Sachs, the AI czar of Trump, born in South Africa. Peter Thiel, massive connections to South Africa and to what is now Namibia. Another guy called Botha, who was related to Pik Botha, the last foreign minister of the apartheid regime. And then they all come together in America, together.
Why are we so inclined to giving over our lives to experts who tell us to trust the science?
We had all these new innovations in science, so there is a premium all of a sudden on experts.
The administrative state is constructed on a foundation focused on expertise that the progressives created.
We need the finest minds. It's when the government is the expert that can be dangerous.
It essentially believed that if you had enough science and enough power, you could fix the human condition.
The progressives really took this question of scientific efficiency, and they said, well, this is an idea really that applies across a whole range of things, including politics.
We are going to fulfill the longings of the soul through expert government programs. We're going to bring the city of God down to earth.
If we would keep faith, if we would make democracy succeed, I say we must act now.
individuals have to be managed, and society is like this big mechanism that we need to control.
That's the big mistake. That's the category mistake.
Fraud, executive power.
A country is not a company.
This nation is asking for action, and action now.
What has happened is these technologies have not been used to enhance anything except marketing and manipulation, whether it's for commercial or governmental purposes. And you go back to even Zbigniew Brzezinski's work in a book he wrote back in the 70s, Between Two Ages, and it was a projection of what was going to happen based on technology, both economically, socially, politically. And it was written in 73 when he was at Columbia University. And if you read that book today, it's like a history book of what's happened the last, 50 years, because he was so dead on accurate. And some will say, well, it was design. I would agree to a certain extent it is. When you lay out something as clearly and then you move in a direction with the billions and literally trillions of dollars spent in these interrelated areas of technology, we're at that place again in history where we decide, are we free or are we slaves, on a very different level. And it's a technocracy that's evolved, if you think about it from that perspective. It's more than just technology, it's political application of it. And that's what Zerbinski was saying. No matter whether you're a liberal, you use one set of rationale, or a conservative, you use another rationale. But the temptation to use these technologies would be overwhelming. And that's the thing that people need to be aware of, is government wants stability, and too much of government is hidden from public view. In the U.S., black projects, those funded where the Congress doesn't even get to look in, amount to trillions of dollars over decades. And these are things that are hidden from you. Talking about what's in the open literature today is what we're talking about today.
We live in an age based on science and technology with formidable technological powers. And if we don't understand it, by we, I mean the general public, if it's something that, oh, I'm not good at that, I don't know anything about it, then who is making all the decisions about science and technology that are going to determine what kind of future our children live in? And this combustible mixture of ignorance and power, sooner or later, is going to blow up in our faces. I mean, who is running the science and technology in a democracy if the people don't know anything about it?
Have API developers pay us, and we have ChatGPT.
Okay, can I jump to then can I just jump real quickly? One of my biggest concerns about this space is what I've already seen in the space of Web 2, Web 3, is this massive corporate concentration. It is really terrifying to see how few companies now control and affect the lives of so many of us. And these companies are getting bigger and more powerful. And I see, OpenAI backed by Microsoft, Anthropic is backed by Google. Google has its own in-house product, Bar. So I'm really worried about that. And I'm wondering if Sam, you can give me a quick acknowledgement. Are you worried about the corporate concentration in this space and what effect it might have, and the associated risks, perhaps, with market concentration in AI? And then, Mr. Marcus, can you answer that as well?
I think there will be many people that develop models. What's happening now in the open source community is amazing, but there will be a relatively small number of providers that can make models at the true
is there
leading
danger
edge.
in that?
I think there is benefits and danger to that. Like, as we were talking about all of the dangers with AI, the fewer of us that you really have to keep a careful eye on the absolute bleeding edge of capabilities, there's benefits there. But I think there needs to be enough, and there will, because there's so much value, that consumers have choice, that we have different ideas.
Mr. Marcus, real quick.
There is a real risk of a kind of technocracy combined with oligarchy, where a small number of companies influence people's beliefs through the nature of these systems. Again, I put something in the record about the Wall Street Journal about how these systems can subtly shape our beliefs, and that has enormous influence on how we live our lives. And having a small number of players do that with data that we don't even know about, that scares me.
Sam, I'm sorry.
One more thing I wanted to add. One thing that I think is very important is that what these systems get aligned to, whose values, what those bounds are, that is somehow set by society as a whole, by governments as a whole. And so creating that data set, our alignment data set, it could be an AI constitution, whatever it is, that has got to come very broadly from society.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My time's expired, and I guess the best for last.
Thank you, Senator Booker. Senator Wells.